Let's be honest, most of us know the Titanic story from that famous movie. The sad violin music, the iceberg, and the giant ship sinking into icy waters. When I watched it as a kid, I always thought, what terrible luck. To sail across a massive ocean and hit an iceberg in the middle of the night. It feels like destiny, right? But when you grow up and look at things through the eyes of science, the picture changes. Because in engineering, there is no such thing as destiny. There are only negligence and consequences. Recently, while examining an old photo album from 1912, a chilling detail was noticed. The ship hadn't even left the port yet. Not a single passenger had boarded, but there was a strange, dark mark on its hull, right at the exact spot where the iceberg would later strike. That mark is actually the clue that changes everything. All this time, we thought the iceberg hit and it was over. But that wasn't the whole story. That unsinkable ship was actually burning from the inside before it even set sail. Strangely, the officials knew about it, but covered it up. It wasn't just the ice, it was the secrets hidden inside and the ridiculous mistakes made that truly brought the end. Let's look at what really happened. Let's dig into this black mark mystery. Because this isn't some internet conspiracy theory, it was brought to light by an Irish journalist named Sinan Moloney, who has dedicated his life to Titanic research. One day, while looking at old photos taken by the ship's electrical engineers, photos no one had paid attention to before, he noticed something. There was a dark, black smudge on the starboard side of the hull. Here is the strange part. This mark is located exactly where the ship's coal bunker, specifically Boiler Room 6, was located. And even worse, this is the exact spot where the iceberg tore the ship open. So, what was that mark? It wasn't just soot or a paint error. It was the visible scar of a coal fire that had been burning inside for days. As you may know, ships back then ran on coal, and coal can sometimes heat up and ignite on its own in storage. This is called spontaneous combustion. At least 10 days before Titanic left the port, the coal in that bunker had already started smoldering. Normally, what do? You cancel the voyage, unload the coal, and put out the fire, right? But Titanic's management didn't do that. Tickets were sold. There was a massive advertising campaign, and a delay would mean bankruptcy for the company. So, what did they do? Instead of putting out the fire, they decided to handle it on the way and set sail. They were so cunning that when docking at Southampton, they turned the ship so the clean side faced the dock, hiding the black mark from the public. While those happy people in the photos were waving and drinking champagne, on the other side of the hull, a 1,000-degree inferno was quietly weakening the steel. The management assigned 12 men just to fight that fire. Their plan was simple: shovel the burning coal into the furnaces as fast as possible to get rid of it. That is why Titanic was going so fast toward the iceberg. They weren't trying to break a speed record. They were flooring the engines to burn off that cursed coal. But there was one thing they forgot: the laws of physics. So, here is the big question. Did this fire sink the ship? We need to do some detective work here. While saying fire melted the steel, so the ship split open, sounds logical. Science says otherwise. Experts have simulated this. For that bulkhead to collapse or melt, the temperature would have needed to be much higher. Yes, the fire might have stressed the metal, but not enough to split the ship in two. The real killer was a much smaller piece. That was staring us right in the face, but ignored by everyone. The rivets. Those mushroom-headed metal pins used to hold the massive steel plates together. Remember when I said chain of negligence at the start? This is where the chain broke. When Titanic was being built, strong steel rivets were used for most of the hull. But the massive rivet machines couldn't fit into the curved bow section of the ship. so workers had to hammer them by hand. And because steel is too hard to hammer manually, they used softer, easier to work iron rivets. On top of that, these iron rivets had a high level of slag, meaning they were low quality. Think of it like this. You are sewing a shirt with the most expensive fabric, but you use the cheapest plastic for the buttons. That night, the Iceberg didn't actually crash into the ship. It scraped along the side. But when that pressure hit those soft iron rivets, pop, 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 they all popped off just like a bursting zipper. The plates separated. Add to this the fact that 1912-era steel became brittle like glass in cold temperatures. The ocean water was -2 degrees Celsius. Modern steel might have flexed, but Titanic steel didn't flex. It cracked like a cracker. So, in short, Titanic wasn't sunk by a massive fire or supernatural bad luck. It was sunk by the simple, cost-cutting logic of, let's use the cheap stuff here. Of course, it's easy to blame metal parts, but there is also the human side of things, which is truly hair-pulling. For example, have you ever wondered why the lookouts saw the iceberg so late? Normally, the lookouts in the crow's nest have binoculars, but on Titanic, they didn't. Why? Because the second officer, David Blair, who left the ship right before the voyage, accidentally forgot the key to the binocular locker in his pocket. Yes, it sounds like a joke, but it's true. The safety of the world's largest, most luxurious ship depended on a simple key forgotten in a man's pocket. By the time the lookout spotted the iceberg with the naked eye, it was already too late. And the final blow, communication arrogance. The wireless operator, Jack Phillips, was so busy that when a nearby ship warned him about icebergs, he replied, "Shut up, I'm busy." Because of this answer, the closest ship that could have heard them and saved everyone went silent. In summary, friends, the story of Titanic isn't a love fairy tale or an unfortunate accident as Hollywood tells it. It was a combination of ambitious bosses, hidden fires, cheap rivets, and forgotten keys. But Titanic isn't the only disaster where history turned facts into fancy fairy tales. Take Atlantis, for example. What comes to your mind? Flying ships, lasers, crystals, and a magnificent underwater utopia. Right? I'm sorry, but all of that is just bad science fiction, invented by a failed politician in 1882. The truth behind Atlantis, just like Titanic, is much more terrifying than you think. There were no lasers, but there was a volcano exploding with the force of 4,000 atomic bombs, and a real civilization that vanished in a single night. If you are curious about the Eye of the Sahara lie and the real apocalypse Plato actually talked about, definitely check out the next video. In that one, we don't talk myths, we talk evidence. See you in the next mystery.